In this video, I'm going to show you how to add a table object within your document. So this video builds on top of a previous video that showed how to get started, how to instantiate a report object, and how to publish the report and dump the report into the output stream of an ASP.NET application. So building on top of that, we essentially add a table by calling a section or what other element we want to add a table to by calling the add table method. We also want to keep a reference to the table so we could add objects like rows, and we want to keep track of the rows so we could add cells, and then we could add content to the cells. So this is how we get it done. So we want to qualify this interface by using the InfragisticsDocumentEngine namespace, and we call the section.addTable method. Then a table gets rows. Now, if you may have looked through the documentation for the document engine, you may have noticed that we have tables and we also have grids. You may ask yourself, well, which one do I want to choose? Well, here's the typical answer for that is if you wish to display data in a tabular format where each and every row will have the same exact schema, meaning if you define 4 columns and you want each and every row to always have 4 cells which are underneath each column, then you want to go for the grid objects. However, if you want like a free-form table, like a table where there's a loose schema, so let's say if the first row has 3 cells but the next row has 10 cells, then you want to go with the table object. You can use the table as a grid, but it also allows you to be flexible in a row-to-row basis. So in this case, we'll work with the table. Next, we need to add rows to the table. And finally, a row gets one or many cells. And finally, we want to add content to the cell. In this case, we'll choose plain text. And finally, we want to add a string to the text block within the cell. Again, we're keeping this example simple, but it's just to give you an idea of how to work with the document engine and how to add elements to the document and then populate these elements. So it's kind of like a top-down programming fashion. So in other words, if I add this cell and then add 20 more cells down the line, I can't really reference the first cell that I added through a collection of some kind. I'm going to need to hold on to the reference of whatever I added previously. So that's how it works. So if I wanted to just add a few more cells of text, I could do something similar to this. So we could add another row and then add another cell and then add some more text. Then I could also add another cell to that same existing row. So essentially we've added one row, and then we add a couple of cells to this second row. If I were to run this right now, you're going to see what it looks like. However, I haven't shown you any styling. So if I were to press the button and generate the documents, you're going to notice that this is the first row that I added, and you notice that this table allows a flexible schema. Then the next row has 2 cells in it with various text. So up to now, I've just simply shown you how to create a table and add some rows, then add some cells to each row. Haven't showed you anything about styling. Let me give you an example of how we can go about styling. Styling must be provided for each element. However, it depends on what elements we're styling, but for this example, we can provide styles for each table cell on a cell-by-cell basis. So let's do that right now. I'll show you how it's done. So we can create one style that addresses the border of an element, and then we can reuse this, or we could create individual styles for each cell. So in this case, let's just create one border object. So let's take a look at the APIs for the table cell real quick. So the table cell dot, we have properties such as alignment, background, borders, then we have height, margins, paddings, and width. The style that I'm going to create essentially represents the border of the cell. So let's do that. We need to set the borders property to an instance of a borders object that contains styling information. So in order to do that, we need to define one or create an instance of that. So borders. Within the constructor of borders, we have many different options. We can either instantiate the objects and then set the properties in subsequent lines of code, or we can choose the constructor that defines what we're most looking to accomplish. I'm going to choose this one because this one allows us to specify a pen, and we can also provide a value that dictates the roundness of the 4 corners of this border that addresses the entire region of the element of the cell. I'm going to use pre-made pens that exist in the Infragistics graphics namespace. The pens object contains a list, or contains a bunch of predefined pens, and I'll choose blue. Then I'll provide a radius value of 3. That should give us a slight round corner. And then we assign it to the borders property of the table cell. We could actually duplicate this line so that all the cells get this. And I save the application and run it, and let's see what we get. So I click the button, and now you notice that the first cell within the row gets the blue pen and the rounded corners. Then we get the same styling applied to the multiple cells that were added as well. So if I zoom in on it just so you can see what it looks like up close, this is what it looks like when you specify pre-made pen. The pen has a default thickness as well, or rather the border has a default thickness, and this radius makes it nice and round. So there's many different ways that we can style the elements within the document engine, and there's many different access points or properties throughout the elements that we can add. Plus we have the granularity of creating a separate style on each element, or we can kind of share a style like I did, so that all elements that we want get the same type of style. So stay tuned for other videos that show how to work with the document engine, and thank you for watching.
Infragistics. on the web at InfragisticsDocumentEngine.com.